You will recall a week ago and then maybe 3 weeks ago. Well, actually, I've had this conversation with you probably a dozen times in the last few months. And over the last couple of years, as I was writing The Crash of 2016, I kept coming back to this theme because it appears in the book, which is the idea that there's a lot of similarity between 2014 and 1914. And the world is in a very precarious place, both economically and geopolitically. And that, as the probably apocryphal statement that has been attributed to various folks, that when the last man dies who remembered the horrors of the last Great War, when he dies, the next Great War becomes inevitable. That, in other words, we forget the lessons of history, and then we repeat the mistakes of history. And this is so clear. I mean, Phil Gramm and his buddies at the behest of Ken Lay, blowing up the Glass-Steagall Act and pushing through the Commodity Futures Modernization Act in '99 and 2000, and Bill Clinton signing them. And, everybody just thinking, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, it's worked well for 60 years. I guess we don't need it anymore. And why did that happen? Well, if Graham had introduced that legislation, Graham Leach Bliley, into Congress in 1950, when there were members of Congress who had been alive in the 1920s, when in 21 and 22 and 23, Harding was aggressively deregulating banks and Wall Street and cutting taxes. And they had lived through the 20s, and they saw the crash in 29 as a result of the crash of housing in 27, the crash of the stock market in 29, the unemployment rate fall to in early 1933 to over 35%, and every single bank in the country collapse in March of 33. People who had lived through that, they were in Congress in the 1950s. And if Phil Gramm had introduced that, Graham Leach Bliley or the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, he wouldn't just have been laughed out of the chamber. He probably would have been tarred and feathered. Not tarred and feathered, but he certainly never would have been reelected by his constituents because they all remembered it too. But by 2000, hey, that was 70 years ago. It was 80 years ago, if you really wanted to, the beginning of it. The big mistakes were made in 1921, 22, and 23. That was 80 years ago from 2000. I mean, it was 95. It was almost 100 years ago from now. And so there was nobody in Congress. I know Bill Clinton looks at the legislation. He has no recollection of this. What were the mistakes that led to this? I mean, there were a few people on the sidelines. There were the Paul Krugmans and the Robert Reiches and the Byron Dorgan, who were saying, well, I've read some history books, and you guys are making a big mistake. And they were right. And we haven't, by the way, fixed those mistakes, so our economy is still at risk.